Nebraska. This is TrainingBlend, the official podcast of the State of Nebraska Training and Development Team. Episode 2 with special guest EdToner, our Chief Information Officer for the State of Nebraska. Welcome, Ed.
Well, hello everyone. Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us today. We're going to spend the next few minutes getting to know Ed and talking with him about what's happening with OCIO across the state. We're going to start off actually with some hot seat questions for you.
Okay.
That you have not
I have
prepared
never
for.
seen. Great.
Right. Don't worry, they're not hard.
Okay.
But we'll go around the table and just throw them at you, and whatever comes to mind first.
Oh boy. Okay,
And,
this will be fun.
It's too late to leave at this point,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, that was definitely not in the script.
Okay, first hot seat question, Apple or Android?
Android.
Television or books?
Books.
Marvel or DC?
Neither one.
Whoa.
Technology, guys, that says neither one to that question. Okay, that's great.
That's why you're here today.
Yeah, we'll cut that out so you don't get fired.
That's fine. Yeah,
Country or city?
country.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs. Oh, these were easy. We can just do the whole. We can just keep going.
We've got more. Don't worry. Chicken or steak?
Steak.
Coffee or tea?
Tea. I'm from the South.
So sweet tea.
Sweet.
Is it,
Okay.
is it actually tea?
Yes, real tea. With ice in it and a lot of sugar.
It counts.
A little tea to go with your sugar?
Exactly.
Coke or Pepsi?
Pepsi.
Cake or pie?
Pie.
Now this one's going to tell a lot about you. Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Rolling Stones.
Oh, nice. And last one, chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Chocolate.
That is
You
the correct
passed.
answer.
Yay!
Now, the funny story of the Pepsi thing, when you said that, is I love Pepsi, and the headquarters for Pepsi is Dallas. And I used to have to go, because I worked at Blockbuster Video, their headquarters, well, we would all get together, all the different companies, and we would host technology get-together. And so I would host it with Blockbuster, then JCPenney's, then Pepsi. But in Texas, everything is a Coke.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've made the mistake when I first came here. Someone went through Subway. What do you want? Oh, I want a Coke. And I didn't mean a Coke. I meant, let me look at what you got. So I got a Coke. Oh, done. And so we got in trouble every time we went to Pepsi because they would always come in and say, because they also own Frito-Lay and all those. So they would always have chips and they'd bring us drinks and they would say, what would you like to drink? And we'd say, well, what kind of Cokes do you have? And they would get, oh, no. And it took me a while to go, okay, I want a Pepsi. So when you said that, it was funny because I love Pepsi, but Pepsi is headquartered there, but yeah, we call it Coke. Everything's a Coke.
Just recently had this conversation, I think on Sunday, with a friend who is from Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's Coke.
Yes.
And I was saying that once when in college I went on a trip and we were staying with some people in South Texas and they said, do you want a Coke?
Mhm.
I love Coke. So I said, yes.
And they brought you a Dr. Pepper.
They brought me a sweet tea.
Yeah, everything is Coke.
Everything is Coke.
You have to say what kind of Coke you want.
All right. Well, let's start with this question. Ed, can you tell us about the path that led you to your current role with the OCIO?
Yeah, it was a little bit different than most CIOs, even in the private sector. This is my first time in the public sector. I've been here about 4 years, a little over 4 years. First time ever in the public sector, but even in the private sector, my role was a different path than a lot of CIOs take. I started out as an industrial engineer right out of college, and so process improvement, all that kind of thing. And so I started working for a large manufacturer of heating, ventilation, air conditioning, right? And then I went on to a chemical manufacturing plant. And at that time in the 80s, we didn't write. We would do all this process improvement, and a lot of it needed software, and we didn't have any COTS programs or commercial off the shelf program. You had to write everything. So my background was also in computer science, so I wrote my own programs, and we also did our own networking. We did all of that because there was nothing that we could just buy. So after doing that for several years, I realized, wait a minute, there's more money in the IT side, so let's move over there. So I went to work for Blockbuster Video. I worked out of their data center in McKinney, Texas, which is north of Dallas. And I led a team of store support analysts. So what they did was when the store's credit card machine went down or anything like that, we walked them through the troubleshooting of that. And we had 5,000 stores at that time, and it was a lot of fun. And I did a lot of work with infrastructure then because a lot of the problems were infrastructure related. And so my career just really stayed in the infrastructure realm. So from there, I got recruited by an old boss to come to Ameritrade, TD Ameritrade today. And I thought I was moving to Omaha, Nebraska, but then they decided they wanted me to start a team, an IT team, and asked me if I would do that in Fort Worth, Texas, where there was a lot more staff, a lot more opportunity to build a team. So I built an IT team that's still there today in Fort Worth, Texas. And then after a few years, they decided, no, you need to come to Omaha, which was fine. I thought I was moving to Omaha back in the 90s. So in the mid-2000s, I came here and then ended up moving over to First Data. And the reason why I moved over there was, again, a connection I had over there. And I had a chance to get out of an infrastructure role. Infrastructure meaning servers and all that good stuff, networking, all that. And I was given the opportunity to lead an app dev team. And I was given an even better bonus because once I got there, I found out that the app dev teams were in England and in Argentina. So that was a lot of fun because I got to travel to both locations.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah.
That
And
would be
then
fun.
I ended up, after that, my last year there, I went back in infrastructure and led architecture teams. And we redesigned a lot of our platforms for First Data. And then here I am, I'm back with the governor in the public sector. It kind of a roundabout way to get to where I am, even for a traditional IT person, but a kind of a roundabout way to get from a private sector to the public sector.
Do you notice there are any different challenges in the public sector versus private?
There's a lot of similarities. One, the people are the same, right? And people always ask me that, what's it like to work with, but the people are, very passionate about their work, just like in private sector. They're very capable people. I think the biggest difference is that we're all constrained with some of the policies and procedures, right? I think there's things that we would all like to do, but the rules, right? For instance, the A87 rules that I have to go by, where when we sell products and we make sure that, we can't have more than 3 months in reserve and things like that. It takes a little while to get used to the nonprofit mode of public, right? And a little bit more of a slower pace, which I think government is meant to be slowed down a little bit, which is probably a good thing. But I'm used to things moving faster. But it's not because of the people. The people are ready to move faster. It's because of the way we're structured. We're not allowed to move faster. And I think that's the only difference.
Okay.
Good points. Okay, I'm next. Next
Okay.
question. One thing we've all heard about recently is the new plan for computer equipment. Can you walk us through how the new plan works?
Yes. One thing that we learned with consolidation was that the natural impulse for agency leaders, especially those that are in the smaller agencies and maybe their funding isn't as appropriate as they would like it to be, I'll just say that. Where do they cut costs? Well, they cut costs on equipment. And we do that at home, right? You have a computer and you say, it'll last one more year. Well, best practice is you replace a laptop every 4 years, you replace a desktop every 5 years. And there's a reason for that. And there's a lot of studies that are done. You lose security with an older workstation. Efficiency is lost. The speed of them, they're always getting faster and better. and we can update them on a newer PC much easier. So one of the reasons is if we own the PC and you are leasing from us, we'll make sure that you're always up to date, that you're always at best practice. And those are best practices that are laid out industry-wide. The second thing that we can do with that is, and it actually became an issue when insurance, for instance, when they had their fire and they had to move to another location. Well, because of the bureaucracy we just talked about, and the A87 rules, I can't subsidize another agency with someone else's equipment. So if I own the equipment, I'm not subsidizing anyone. So in other words, if I had an employee that left DAS after 1 year, well, they still have 3 years on their laptop. Under the old way we did it, with DAS owning it, I could only give that laptop to another DAS employee. Because if I gave it to an HHS employee who gets federal funding, I just subsidized them. I'm not allowed to do that. But if I own them and I charge everyone equally, I will never get into an issue of subsidizing an agency that gets already government subsidies.
Great information to know.
Mhm.
Thank you for that.
See, a lot of times, and I appreciate the question, because a lot of people think, well, what are they trying to do, right? Well, we're trying to really make sure that you're up to date. And second of all, allow us that flexibility to get, and I can take a laptop from one agency and give it to another, and we're much more efficient that way.
Great.
Mhm.
Thank you for
I
that.
would have never thought of it
No.
that
I wouldn't-
as one of the driving reasons for it, but
No.
that makes perfect sense now that you
Right.
explain
Yeah,
it.
Because
it
like
does.
HHS is 90-10 funded in some, 65-35. So if they bought a laptop, well, the federal government paid 65% of that laptop. Then I go and give it to you, who you're not federally funded. Well, I just subsidized. I just took federal money and gave it to an agency that I shouldn't have given it to.
You can't do that.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you for explaining.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, there's always a reason behind
There
it, but,
There
but
is.
unfortunately, a lot of times we don't get the message out very well.
Well, we'll do that today.
That was a great question.
All right, next question. Earlier this year, you were named by GovTech as one of the top 25 doers, dreamers, and drivers of 2018. And a big, big congratulations from the training team. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what would you say are some of the factors that led up to you receiving this honor?
Well, I think a lot of things happened in 2018 that kind of came together for us as a state. Consolidation was finished up in 2018. As far as the three phases, we centralized the network. We centralized all the servers. They're moved into our 2 data centers. And we now have the service centers, the 8 service centers across the state that do desktop support, which has really improved our efficiencies and our service levels. So that definitely helped. And then I think at the same time, the Office of the CIO was recognized by the National Association of State CIOs for that project, because that was the #1 enterprise technology project of the year. And we have our trophy sitting in our office there. So we got a national award from my peers. My peers actually vote on what was the most impactful thing done, technology project done in all of the states. And so we got that award. And then I do a lot of, and I'll put a plug in for my blog. I write a blog every month. Some of you might be on the distribution list for that. I have a pretty big following actually outside of the state, but I'm the top 30 public and state the top 30 state and city blogs for the last 4 years. So 2015,
Oh,
16,
nice.
15, 16, 17, and 18, I won the top blogs.
Amazing.
How do we
So-
find your blog?
Yeah.
if you just type in EdToner CIO blog, you take you right to it, and I talk about everything. I talk about the things that we just talked about today. A lot of the different things that we're doing and why we're doing them. And so it's actually, I was just at a meeting with CIOs, and the CIOs all signed up, and they all read it across all the states because I give my opinion on everything.
Great. That's a way to get noticed.
Right. So that was just it was a big year, and I hope 2019 is another big year.
Yeah.
Sounds like you need to do a podcast.
Yeah. Well, definitely look up my blog. Some of them are pretty entertaining, and some of them you'll learn a little bit more about me, and you'll learn about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it was meant to really allow the people within the OCIO to understand how I'm thinking about things, so that they understand why am I doing things, why am I asking that we do these projects. And then it just evolved into we post our metrics out there so that the state can see it. It's an external facing site. And then like I said, I found out that now all the CIOs are reading it, and they're big blog followers too, because a lot of times I say things that they're thinking.
All right. In terms of training and professional development opportunities, what would you say is the greatest need for teammates in your agency?
Well, I think the leadership program, and I'm not just saying it because I'm in a group that does this leadership program. I say it because my team really does get a lot of pride out of that. They've had me take their pictures with them and things like that, so they're very proud of their accomplishment. And so anytime that they can get an opportunity to learn to be a better leader or prepare themselves to be a leader, I think that's a fantastic thing, because normally IT folks are a little introverted and they don't like to lead. So those few that do like to lead, they need that class, right? Because they need to be prepared for what they're getting into. In some cases, they may decide from that class that they don't want to be a leader, right? They don't want to be a manager. That hasn't happened. Everyone's come out of it has been more dedicated to that. I think the other so that's the non-traditional IT training that we need. They also need their subject matter expertise, right? So if they're in network, we always make sure they get their training in networking. Server admin, they do that. And then they all really learn best practices that are really shared in the private sector more than in the public. And in fact, when I came to the public sector, we didn't have this. But there's different levels of certification in what's called ITIL. And ITIL is Information Technology Infrastructure Library, which sounds like, what is that? And that's what I even say today, what is that? But what it is it's really just a set of best practices for IT. And it tells us, okay, this is the best practice. It's kind of like when I said the best practice is to refresh your PCs at a certain interval. This sets out those best practices, and you can actually get certified at different levels of ITIL. So there's developmental foundations. So it's the foundation level of this is the basics that you need to know. And then there's another phase where it's like change management. And it doesn't mean like organizational change management. It's more like how do you make changes in the IT world and not have all your customers have an outage, right? And those best practices for that.
We appreciate those.
Yes. And so my team has really started and that's online with lynda.com. You have all of those levels of training in ITIL in that offering. And so our teams go through there, and a lot of folks are assigned those to learn the different levels of best practices.
Great.
And we're probably one of the few professions that actually have best practices laid out for us, and they change them every year. They get updated for the newest technologies.
Great.
So kind of along the lines of training, what's your most memorable learning experience?
Yeah. I just talked about my blog, and you can read this one in a blog, and it was a blog on leadership, and I actually do speeches around the country on leadership now. I've been asked at a lot of summits and things to talk about transformational leadership, because that's really what we did here with the consolidation. And I always start out by talking about just leadership in general, and I always talk about there's transactional leaderships, which a lot of people are transactional. So in other words, as a leader, you just do the job, right? You react. That's a transactional. And then there's transformational leaders. And I really put myself more in the transformational because I'm always looking to change what we're doing. And there's no way to make better change than for people to really respect you for what you do, right? I always tell people your title is the last thing that people should know about you, right? Mm-hmm. They should respect you for what you do, your knowledge, for how you treat them, things like that. And at the very end, if they find out that you're the CIO, then that's fine. Mm-hmm. But other than that, they should already have a respect for you. And so my best learning experience was exactly that. I was 21 years old when I graduated from college, went to work for the HVAC company, and as an industrial engineer, and industrial engineers do process improvement. We do plant layouts. We do, we try to redesign our products to be more cost effective when we build them, things of that sort. And so I did a lot of plant redesigns and a lot of putting in automation and things of that sort. And my first week there, my boss came in and said, "Oh, by the way, the latest hiree as far as the engineers, the last one in always gets to manage the maintenance team." And I thought, okay, maintenance for a huge plant. This is, I've never done that before. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, this will be a challenge because I really, as an engineer, didn't think I was going to be a leadership position for years, right? You work your way up. And I'm 21 and a guy comes in named John and he sits down and he's like the roughest looking guy I've ever seen. And he's smoking a cigarette and he uses my cup of coffee for his ashtray. And I thought, who is this guy? And he turned out he was my foreman, maintenance foreman that was coming in to meet me. Well, I didn't know that who he was or anything. And I sat there and he looked at me and he says, he said something else, but I'll calm down. But he said, I've got tools that are older than you. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, you probably do. And he says, come on out. Do you want to meet the team? And I said, sure, I'll meet the team. It was about 18 people at that time. And so I walked in, and on the way there, it was a union shop. And on the way there, he says, "You understand union rules?" Well, I'd only been there 3 days, And I never thought I had to worry about the union because I didn't think I was managing people. I didn't, And I said, no, I'm not really familiar with the union rules at all. My boss didn't really prepare me for anything. And he says, well, there's a rule that you need to know before you meet your team. And I said, well, what is it? And he goes, the punishment for striking your boss is 3 days off without pay for the first offense. The second one, it's a firing offense. First one, 3 days off. Your boss or anyone else. But he made sure that they understood, I understood boss, me. And I said, really? And essentially I said, well, how many of them have had their first strike, right? And he said, well, that's the thing. None of them had their first strike, and they all like to fish. And I thought, okay, well, that's a really good lesson to learn. So probably the best lesson I ever learned is don't make them mad enough that they're going to hit you because they'll go out fishing. And so I was required, this was back in the days before, I guess, labor laws, but I would work Monday through Friday as an engineer and managing them. And then I was required to come in and put in at least 4 hours every Saturday. And they didn't care what I did. I didn't understand that rule. I still don't understand it today. But I did all my work during the week. And, of course, on Saturday, I'd come in like I was supposed to. But then I would go out and do maintenance chores with my maintenance team. So I sat there with them every day. And I welded with them. And I did all the things that, because I could come in on Saturday in my jeans. And I didn't have to wear my tie and all that. And so I worked with them. And I worked right next to them every Saturday, and they knew that, and that's where you kind of gain respect of, okay, I'll do the work, and then I'll understand, I'll crawl inside of that cooling tower with you, and we'll, acid wash it, and we'll do all those things. And then when I ask you to do it, I've done it with you, right? And so that was my best experience, was to have these really rough guys that told me exactly what they thought. And they taught me to be a better leader, because I really did learn from them about how to manage different people and how to gain their respect. And it was a great learning experience. And some of the stories, when you have a lot more time, I can tell you a whole lot of neat stories.
Okay, well, we have one more question for you.
I'm having fun.
All right. We are
So are
too.
we.
We are too. It's always surprising how quickly the time goes by.
Yeah.
Yes.
Last question here. Tell us something about you we may be surprised to learn.
Well, probably being from Texas isn't going to be a surprise for anybody, but I think a lot of people don't realize I'm an Army brat, and so I lived all over the world, and I actually didn't come back to the United States. I spent my entire middle school in Germany. So I went to 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, because that was the longest time my dad had ever been stationed anywhere, and it was in Hanau, Germany, and we didn't have TV. So I should have been reading Marvel comics, but I didn't. I learned to read books. And so it probably was the best thing ever, was to live 4 years without a TV, because I ended up having to entertain myself with reading and things of that sort. And so I came back to the United States for high school. And before Germany, we were in Alaska. Before Alaska, we were in Washington, D.C. Before D.C., we were in Colorado Springs. Before Colorado Springs, we were in Seattle, Washington. So we moved a lot as a kid. And so the really interesting part of the story is that I lived in Hanau, Germany. And when I did my work for First Data and developers in England, I also had to visit the data center in Germany. Well, in my first visit to the data center in Germany, and I was doing so much travel, I really didn't pay attention. But when I got to the town of Bad Bevel, I walked in and talked to the security guard and said, "Hey, have you ever heard of Hanau?" He goes, "Yeah, it's just down the road. It's 2 or 3 miles down the road." So I thought, well, Hanau is where I spent 4 years of my life. So I thought, well, I'm going to take an afternoon and go to Hanau and find my old house. Well, I couldn't find my house, so I called up my 80-some-year-old dad, and I said, "Hey," and he didn't know I was even in Europe. And I called him up and said, "Hey, Dad, I'm in Hanau, Germany, and I'm lost. I can't find our house."
That's funny.
And he acted like he knew. He said, "Tell me the 2 street, the intersection you're at." I told him. He directed me directly to our house that we used to live in.
Wow.
So that was kind of, so that's kind of funny, because I never expected to ever see that house ever again as an Army brat, but to visit that area for my work was pretty interesting.
Was it like you remembered?
It was. We had some pictures. I took some more pictures and brought them home to my dad so he could see them. And they had shut down the post there, but the homes were still there. They were renovating them, making them into apartments. And my middle school was already converted into a school for mentally disabled. Because I was standing there taking pictures, and one of the teachers came out. I think she thought, "What is he doing?" So I had to explain to her real quick. I had gone to school there for 4 years. And so she was really nice and asked me if I wanted a tour and everything. It was very nice.
I was gonna say, did you get a tour of it?
Yeah.
That sounds cool.
Now, it was much smaller than I thought it was.
Right.
Yeah, I got there and I thought, man, I thought that was a big school. And then I come find out, it was pretty small, really. Yeah.
That's cool.
That's pretty much it. Anybody have anything else you want to ask or talk about?
Anything else you want to tell us?
How did you get to Texas after all of that?
My father's last tour of duty was Fort Hood, Texas.
Okay.
And then I have an accent because everyone in the Army is from the South. So that's kind of funny because my dad's from Michigan, my mother's from California. And when I was growing up, my grandparents would say, give the phone to your mom, Dad, I'm tired of listening to your accent. I was in Germany, my best friends, and that's another really strange coincidence. My best friends were two Texans, one from Mineral Wells, Texas, and one from Baytown. And both of them born and raised Texans. Their dads were Texas Aggies. And when I ended up going to Texas A&M myself, they were both there.
Wow.
And I hadn't seen them
amazing.
since middle school.
Wow.
That's
Small
pretty cool.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Small world in a big place.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we found each other, and so I ended up. I'd always known about Texas Aggies growing up because they were always around in the Army, especially, and so I ended up being one myself. Yep. So the accent I had before I even moved to Texas,
It was meant to be.
That's interesting.
and it's nowhere near what it was when I actually. I have lost. My parents even say that I have lost most of my accent, but that it comes back like within a few weeks.
Yeah, we haven't heard of y'all.
Oh, you have you heard about? See, y'all would.
Thank you.
There's two y'alls, right? So like y'all, this is y'all, right? But if I'm in a meeting, a big talk, it's all y'all.
Oh, y'all.
That's too big. So it's all y'all, and like in TV, no matter what they say, we never say to one person y'all. It's got to be at least two, and that always irritates Texans because some say, they're talking to one, hey y'all, and I'm like, no, you wouldn't say y'all. You'd say, hey you. That's singular. Y'all is yeah. So, but my dad's from Michigan, so he says youans.
You and
And my mom's from California, so she just
says yo.
she says whatever.
Where at in California?
She was born and raised in Sacramento.
Oh, okay.
Debbie's from California.
Yeah, I'm from
Really?
San Diego, Los
Okay.
Angeles area.
Yeah, her family, weird. I didn't know there was a business that did this, but they made lampshades for a living. That was her family
Oh.
business, was lampshades, and they made them for Hearst Castle. That was their big one. Because
Wow,
Hearst Castle
Hearst
was
Castle.
so big
Oh my gosh.
that they would have to do a room at a time.
Yep.
And then when they got done, they had to start all over again.
Mhm.
Because the shades would get all, old, and they wanted to keep them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a great tour
Yeah.
to go through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strange business, a lampshade business.
Yeah.
Something for everyone.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, there's a job out there for everybody.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
is.
Isn't that when you're
Yeah.
like, the head of the party or whatever? What's the saying when you're
You put a lampshade on your head?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Life of the party.
Life of
There
the
you
party.
go.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Or the head of the party.
The poobah.
Party poobah.
Hey, Ed, thanks for joining us
You
today.
bet. This
This was
was
really
fun.
a good time, and we're
No, this
happy
was
that
a
we got
lot
to
of-
learn a little more about you.
You bet.
Thanks for listening to this episode of TrainingBlend. We release new episodes of this podcast monthly. Make sure you follow us at Any State Training on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and State of Nebraska Training and Development on LinkedIn to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Until next time.